Okay, welcome everyone. We are delighted to have you here for this webinar on preprints, accelerating plant sciences and agriculture. We hope that we are going to be hosting a stimulating discussion as to how preprints can drive innovation and scientific progress in both plant sciences and agriculture. Very briefly, I'm Irache Puebla. I'm Associate Director for ASAP Bio. And I'm co-moderating the webinar today with Andy Robinson. He is Managing Director, Publishing and Knowledge Business at CABI. We are here today to speak about preprints. We created this word cloud based on the comments and questions that many of you post on the registration form for the webinar. So thank you for sharing your interest and questions with us. We are going to be touching on many areas related to preprints, and obviously with a focus on plant sciences and agriculture. We hope that we will give you an overview of the benefits of preprints, but also how they fit more broadly in science communication, and hopefully as well as to how they can help us tackle some of the collective challenges that we are facing, for example, around food security or climate change. So to get us started, we thought we would cover a definition of what is a preprint. And I should start by saying that there is no consensual definition across the community as to what is a preprint, but we thought we would offer one that hopefully is broad enough to cover the majority of uses. A preprint is a scholarly manuscript posted by the authors to a repository or platform to facilitate open and broad sharing of early work without any access limitations. And another way of describing a preprint, which I quite like, is an analogy offered by John Inglis. John is the founder of the preprint servers Bioarchive and medRxiv. And he suggested that a preprint is similar to the director's cut of a manuscript, essentially a version of the paper which the authors are ready to share with the community because they consider it an accurate representation of their work, but knowing that the paper may later undergo changes in response to feedback or peer review. One of the main advantages of preprints, and the reason why many researchers are now using them to disseminate their work, is the fact that they make the research papers available almost immediately. Some of you may be familiar with the traditional publication process at journals, which can involve different cycles of submission of a manuscript to a journal, and then the peer review and editorial process, which can take months and sometimes even years. By comparison, when submitting to a preprint server, the paper gets posted after the screening process at the server, which usually is completed in a matter of a few days, which means that the research manuscript will be publicly available very quickly. And this allows the community to provide feedback and to start building on those research findings. Another important consideration here, and I'm sure that we will be discussing that during the conversation today, is the fact that actually posting preprints is compatible with journals. So researchers can actually post their paper as a preprint for rapid dissemination and then decide in parallel or later to also submit their paper to a journal for publication. There are a number of preprint servers available, again, with different disciplinary focus. We will be focusing today on two specific servers, Bioarchive and AgriArchive. Bioarchive is a server, a preprint server for biology, and it obviously also covers a section on plant biology. The second server is AgriArchive, which is a preprint server operated by CABI, and it covers different research areas within agriculture and allied sciences. So given our disciplinary focus today, we are going to be making reference to these two servers regularly in the conversation. And with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker for today, Dr. Sridhar Gupta. Dr. Gupta is senior scientist at ICAR, Indian Institute of Horticultural Research. He is the founder of the preprint servers, AgriArchive and IndieArchive, as well as the founder of the Open Access Journal of Medicinal and Aromatic Plants. Welcome, Dr. Gupta.
Thank you. Thank you for the nice introduction, Iri. The case study of India, I just wanted to say to the audience, and many of our colleagues from India might have joined here. So there is a mad rush to publish very quickly overnight, because there is a pressure to have the publications made before the submissions of the theses, or for any promotions, or for the applications to the higher positions, or to get the grants. When we see that, like in the when the UGC has also made the ranking of the journals, or making the database of the journals in which you can only publish, and for the case of the agriculture, the academy has also ranked the different journals. You are supposed to publish in those journals only, but still there are some other journals which are not there in both of the databases, but it's more sought by the researchers. So because it is the way, the speed of publication. See, there are journals which doesn't do any peer review, so you're publishing. So then what next? You are all, I mean, it's called as a, like, you're publishing in a journals which are of no use. So why don't we take up this preprint mode? Why we should not submit our papers before it gets submitted to a journal, or at the time of a submission, can we deposit in a preprint repository? So as told in introduction, what is a preprints, how it is happening. So this mode of I strongly urge and request the authors to embrace this preprints mode, only to get the two options. Like, one is the getting more visibility of your research work which you have done, and also to get the more feedback, so that you can improve in the next experiments, or in the future of your experiments. So this why was thinking and saying, and this advocacy we were doing under the banner of Open Access India, and we through that community, under the banner of that community only, we started this India Archive and AgriZive, which is now Agri Archive, which is in the safe hands of CABI, to have has now got the sustainable home there. So then after doing that, we were seeing the deposits rates are not being increased. Then we found that there is a lack of advocacy, and then to have more have a discussion on this mode. So we ran one survey during 2020 itself, like last year, when the pandemic was still at this time, in lockdowns were happening. So we just wanted to know how these preprints, our community people are looking at it. Mostly it is directed towards the South Asia, but it has more records from India itself. So I would like to summarize in two graphs which I was trying. There also people were saying that they were going to publish in open access mode, and they are willing to submit the APC charges, and they are not also getting the support from the funders, but they are pooling the money. So pooling the money and submitting to a high, open access journals with a high article processing charges, how much we can justify this? So why open access is immediate availability. So the preprints also give the immediate availability of your publication, and then APCs is only to publish in a most prestigious journal which has more rejection rate and more high article processing charges. So why you have to pay this much of article processing charges? It's only to showcase to the world that you have published in a high impact factor journal. Because I see there are many journals which doesn't charge any APCs, but no publications are reaching them. So one of the case which we have founded in Wave 2006 itself, the Open Access Journal of Medicinal Plants, it stopped publishing from 2018 because there are no submission to that. Why? Because many of the people are looking at the ranks to that journal which have been given, or the marks which have been given. So that is making them to have not to submit to a journal which is, though it is open access, which doesn't charge any APCs, but our sharing is only towards a high article processing charges. So if your aim is to only to make your paper as a more available, and then later on if you want to submit to any journal of as a closed access or an open access, of any choice of yours. So you can later take it. And all the publishers, now I can see around more than 80% of the publishers in the world are having some kind of policy towards preprints. But when we come to the Indian researchers or the Indian community or the Indian journal people, they still have reservations and questions on whether we should encourage the preprint publications or not. But I strongly urge that we have this Agri Archive for the agriculture people, which is in the safe hands of CABI, and the India Archive, the India specific repository. So which we started only to have a more awareness on these preprints. But you can see the records which are in that. It's not reaching much higher numbers, but it's a considerable number. I hope that maybe with this kind of webinars which we frequently organize, we will have a more repository populated with this. This is not only being said by the others, but the academies in India are also strongly for this kind of submission to the preprints. They say that preprints can help in more reach, and also eliminates the idea of plagiarism. These recommendations were made by these three academies to the national framework, to the government, and these were the recommendations by the academy itself. And we can see what the other researchers are also saying. The researchers also towards this kind of a preprint publication system to be more useful, should be used by the people. And one I quote from the blog post that the researcher says that it is the effective and timely way of getting your work to be read by the global community, and it is the only affordable to buy only to the researchers and also towards to the readers also. But there is no much of the charges in this publication process in preprints. So preprints solve this the way one problem. One, availability at the earliest, and wide reach, and can also be improved upon, and when next versions can be made. So once a journal is published with a peer review, there it stops. Though with a few peer reviewers get review your paper, and once it is get published, there is no next version for it. But the beauty of the preprints is that we can have n number of versions. We can improve our work, and the letter itself, the communication which we are submitting to the journals. Okay, here I end my small talk on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sridhar. That was a really fantastic way to open the session today. I'm going to hand on immediately to Samantha Hindle. Sam is a PhD neuroscientist. She joined Bioarchive in 2018 and is now the content manager for Bioarchive and medRxiv. And she oversees the screening and the content workflows on both of those servers. She's also the co-founder of Pre-Review, which is an initiative to help empower early career researchers to engage in community preprint review by providing tools, training, and support to build their peer reviewing expertise. So we all know, I think, that Bioarchive and medRxiv have seen a huge explosion in preprints across the biological sciences. And we're looking forward to hearing a bit from Sam about how that manifests itself in the plant sciences. So over to you, Sam.
Thank you so much, Andy, for that introduction. And it's great to be here, and I'm happy to share data from Bioarchive about plant biology preprints. So first, I just want to show how preprinting has grown over the past 7.5 years on Bioarchive. And you can see here that there's been an exponential growth over the years, to the point where we have around 3,500 manuscripts posting on the site every month now, and more than 100,000 preprints in total. And so how does that break down by subject category? So you'll see that neuroscience is our top subject category, with 18% of the preprints, which is around 21,000 preprints. And plant biology contributes around 3% of the content, which is around 4,000 preprints. So you can see that plant biology is a little bit behind some of the subject categories, but what is encouraging to see is that it is growing over time. So you can see that on the left of the slide. And you can see in comparison to some other disciplines like ecology and cell biology and even bioinformatics, the slope of the curve is very similar. But compared to, say, microbiology and neuroscience, it is not quite as steep a growth curve. So I guess the big burning question is why? And, is there something specific about plant biology and these other disciplines, or is it really just a general, a general question that we need to ask? And so I guess speaking about the general aspect, one of the main concerns that we hear about is, if I post a preprint, will a journal still publish my manuscript? I would say that generally in the life sciences, journals are very supportive of preprints. And if we focus in on some of the plant journals, what I've done here is I've pulled some of the preprint policies from their websites. And you can see that, across these journals are encouraging the posting of preprints. And preprints are, you can post them at any time in the peer review process for some journals, and others you need to post specific versions of your manuscript. So it's good to check the policy. But overall, the message is that posting a preprint is not seen as prior publication, and it will not jeopardize the publication of your manuscript in a journal if you post a preprint beforehand. And to provide a little bit more evidence, we have here some examples from Bioarchive preprints that have gone on to be published in various journals. Here are a range of nature journals, and you'll see here there's a whole table of different plant journals that I'm sure you'll recognize, and that there's hundreds of preprints that have gone on from Bioarchive to be published in these journals. So I'm hoping this has addressed the elephant in the room, and that, concerns are a little bit lower now about whether journals will accept your preprints. And so now I'd like to transition with the next slide to looking at where are submissions coming from and where are they not coming from in terms of plant biology research. And so what you can see here is a map of the world, obviously, and it's a heat map. So you can see that the US is providing the largest proportion of plant biology preprints, at about 25% of the submissions, closely followed by the UK and Germany and France, but also China and India, you'll see on the right-hand side there. And what's really interesting, if you compare and look at the number of journal articles that are being published in plant biology, you'll see that the top ranking country is China. And so when you now normalize the preprint numbers to the number of journal articles, you can see that some countries like Germany and the UK are enriched for plant biology preprint posting, and some countries such as China and Brazil are under contributing. And so this kind of helps us to think about how we direct our advocacy, because there's a huge degree of potential there for increasing the amount of plant biology preprints. And so I was interested by this, and so I looked into China in a little bit more detail. And you can see here the number of plant biology preprints from China over time. And you can see that there was sort of a general steady trend for, the past several years, and kind of a sudden shift of an increase in the number of plant biology preprints from China. And if you map this to the dates, you can see that this is basically around the pandemic. And so I know the numbers are very small, but it's interesting and curious because this trend is continuing to increase. And so maybe one could argue that it's an increase in global awareness of preprints that is also impacting other disciplines as well. So there is some hope. And so with the next slide, I just want to talk really briefly about some of the benefits to posting, like why should plant biologists be posting preprints early or posting preprints at all? And so my argument is that, as Arachi was saying at the beginning, there's huge impact in plant biology research in terms of food supply and climate control. And so here's just a couple of examples. One is Ash Dieback, which in this particular article was talking about the pandemic in the UK. And they were predicting here that this could kill 95% of UK's ash trees. And so you might be wondering, okay, why do I care about that? There's a potential for huge impact on climate control, but also on economics as well, which affects the area immensely. And this isn't just a problem for the UK, it's problems elsewhere in the world as well. I just want to share a story from Dr. Sofian Kamoun. And so his lab has really exemplified the incredible feats that can be gained from genomic surveillance that are were only possible because of how open he was with his research from the get-go. And so this openness from his lab and also from collaborating labs across the world helped them to identify very quickly, if you look at this timeline, very quickly what the problem was in Bangladesh when there was this outbreak of wheat blast. And so like within weeks to months, they were able to work out the source of the problem. And then they were able to share this on open platforms and also on preprint servers, one of their preprints. And so I just want to argue that it's as important to understand plant pandemics as well as a human pandemic such as COVID-19. And so I'm just going to leave you with the question with the next click, which is what can we learn from the COVID-19 preprint response to help our understanding of plant pandemics? And I'm really looking forward to this discussion with you all, and I hope we can come up with the answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Brilliant. So I think Sam really tackled the elephant in the Zoom in that talk. And I did put into the chat box at the bottom a link to a page on Agri-Archive where we've gone through and listed hundreds of journals that are preprint friendly. So please do take a look at that. So we're going to move on very quickly to Stephanie, Dr. Stephanie Van Wyk, who is a postdoctoral research fellow at the Forestry and Agricultural Biotechnology Institute in the University of Pretoria. She's also chair of the Postgraduate Genomics and Genetics Journal Club. Her research focuses on fungi of agricultural and economic importance, and she's going to talk about her work on the development of Ripper, which she'll use as a case study for preprints from the perspective of an early career researcher. So over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much. I guess you said it all. So I just wanted to say good day to everyone. And in this short talk, I want to highlight 3 points to illustrate the importance of preprints and the particular value it has for early career scientists. These points are the use of preprints in advancing current technologies, the use of it in journal club discussions, and then also my own experience of publishing research as a preprint. As Andy said, the major output of my research was the development of a set of software tools that I called the Ripper. So in essence, this tool investigates the genetics of mutations in fungal pathogens. So what makes this tool particularly important from an agricultural perspective is that these mutations are significantly more prominent amongst plant pathogens. Even more so, these mutations tend to favor genomic regions directly underlying host pathogen interactions. Now, at the time, this piece of software and the technique we used, we thought would be quite controversial and will take some time to be accepted by the scientific community. However, this was not the case. And instead, what we found that the use of preprints, or the majority of research citing our technology, was preprints. In fact, as much as 65% of the citations were preprints. And when one thinks about it, that is the greater majority. So even though this response was unexpected, the use of preprints substantially contributed to reducing the expected time that this technology would take to be accepted by the community, but also put it in the forefront of similar bioinformatic approaches. So listed here are some of the most influential papers that were published as preprints. These are all within the last 6 months of 2020 and then the first 4 months of 2021. And what I particularly want to highlight is a study done by Peck et al. Shown on the left corner. This was initially submitted as a preprint, but then the techniques applied within were then later again cited by other preprint journals, which I think is really interesting. And I hope that we get to it in the question section, the idea of preprints citing preprints. So currently, the Ripper, or our technology, has about 1,000 unique users from around the world. In fact, 35 different countries, and its success can be directly attributed to the use of preprints. Indeed, preprints played an invaluable and a global role in advancing this technology. And please click. For this reason, myself and my colleagues welcome the use in preprints in our Genomes and Genomics Journal Club to similarly stay informed in new techniques and trends that have been used to study plant pathogens. So for my final thoughts, and I've left, for me personally, the best for last. During a recent webinar called RIP 2020, hosted by the University of Neuchâtel, I was fortunate enough to present my research. But oh no, what happened was I found that a much more established researcher found the exact same finding as that I did during my research. Locally, we call this being scooped. I think it might be the same internationally. So luckily, my manuscript was well edited and ready to go. So we opted, myself and my co-authors, to release it as a preprint. And this helped it from being viewed as, wow, this is actually a really groundbreaking, substantial finding by somebody else. And then, oh yes, me too, to making something that's actually really cool and valuable. With that, I'd like to thank everybody. You can just click again. That's my preprint down there. I would like to thank everybody for their time. And in this talk, I highlighted how preprints advance current technologies, how it inspires journal club discussions, and how preprints can save an early career scientist from the dreaded scoop. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Really excellent. Thank you very much. Just want to keep on time now, but please do remember to put any questions you might have in the Q&A area, and also feedback and comments in the chat section. Very happy to pick those up later on. And then now we're going to move on to our final speaker, who's Professor Dr. Nick Grunweld, who's a research plant pathologist at the Horticultural Crops Research Laboratory at the USDA Agricultural Research Service. He's also a courtesy professor at Oregon State University. His interests really include the ecology, genetics, and management of emerging and re-emerging Phytophthora diseases. Nick has previously been the editor-in-chief of several American Society of Phytopathology journals, and he's now the founding editor-in-chief of CABI's Agriculture and Bioscience Open Access Journal. And we're going to hear from Nick, really looking at this topic of preprints from the perspective of a journal editor. So over to you, Nick.
Thank you very much, Andy, for that nice introduction. So from the editor's perspective, I see a trend of all major journals moving towards preprints. So I was very pleased to see, for example, that eLife recently shifted to exclusively reviewing preprints, and I think they're setting a trend that will permeate all of our journals. Besides preprints and traditional peer-reviewed journals, there are also hybrid journals, and one of the journals that pioneered this was F1000 Research, and I'm showing a study here that I was involved in. So I had direct experience in this, and this was a very pleasurable experience. So F1000 Research accepts preprints, and then these can be peer-reviewed, and you can see that the different versions, everything is time-stamped, the peer reviews are open. At top right, you see the different versions of the manuscripts as they go through peer review, and eventually they reach a peer-reviewed status. And all of this is documented, and then the title of the paper that you cite also includes the versions and the peer reviews and whether they were approved or not. So this is kind of a very transparent system that this journal pioneered. And I think eLife is now gravitating towards that too. And I would think that this model will permeate most of our scientific peer review scholarly journal world. So from my perspective, or that perspective of most journals, preprints are not considered prior publication, and this is a really important point. If you submit a paper to a journal, you should use the DOI of the preprint when submitting it for peer review, so that the journal knows that this is available somewhere else. As far as I know, all major journals accept publication in preprint archives. And one of the nice things about these preprints is that the scientific community can provide comments and peer reviews prior to publication, which particularly for really hot areas, like for example, COVID-19, or an example that I show at the end, really provides a means of rapid communication and peer review. So once a preprint is accepted in a peer-reviewed journal, the archives automatically link, and I show here a paper, and at the bottom right, you see that Bioarchive linked this to the respective PLOS journal. So these become one entity. And Bioarchive still houses the last version of the PDF manuscript that was submitted to Bioarchive. Some authors might ask as up to what point you can update your work. So the preprint archives typically accept updates until a paper is in press at a peer-reviewed journal. And then only the original raw PDF, the last version of that PDF in a preprint archive like Bioarchive or AgriArchive is then visible. So what are the benefits, both for the journals and for the authors? One really nice thing is that it creates networks. For example, in this particular study that we're showing here, this was a paper submitted to AgriArchive and eventually was published in CABI Agriculture Bioscience. And it was really important to communicate this rapidly because it was a new invasion of the apple snail, the golden apple snail, into Kenya. And as you can see at the top right, a quote from one of the authors. It was very pleased to connect up with scientists in Brazil. Without submission to a preprint archive, this rapid dissemination of the information and rapid communication about interested parties would not have happened. The other side effect is that this leads to a lot of views and downloads and citations and a higher altmetric score, which benefits both the authors and the journals. So with that, I think that is my last slide, and I'll turn it back to you, Rache.
Thank you so much for the presentations. I think we are now moving on with a session of a roundtable discussion. We were hoping to introduce some questions, Andy, I think you're leading this section.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, thanks to all of our speakers for some really, really excellent talks there. We wanted to just go through some general questions that have been popping up from the registrants and also throughout the chat. We've heard from several of you really about the fact that one of the benefits of preprints is that they allow prompt dissemination of research, but also that they can help progress some of the challenges we're facing around food security and climate change. So Nick and Sridhar, how do you feel preprints really push forward developments around those challenges?
Yeah, I'll take this. Preprints now we have seen in this COVID pandemic times. So we should, like, only during the pandemic, we should not go more into preprints. Preprint should be the way to reach out to the masses. And the pandemics may occur. We don't know when it occurs and all those things. Access to the data and information should be available at every time. So this the climate change and the food security issues are also equally, like, they are the burning problems to the world now. Because of that, many issues are also coming. So during this, the climate change aspects or the food security aspects, preprints will give a more like now the two presenters were also saying about there was a case of a snail and then other things. Many things will happen and it needs to be rapidly communicated and needs to be vetted with other peers, somewhere not in your own institute, but is available everywhere. So it has to be, this preprint is the only option where we can reach out, get more feedback, and then give the information at the quickest, and then say to the world that, see, this is happening and this is what we are going to do, and these are the results and these are the findings, and these are the ways to minimize the losses or to have the control of any pest. And rapidly now the fall worm is there. It was growing like a war, it's a war, like a situation in other countries as well, and the locust. So all forewarning systems will only depend upon when you have a data which is available to be used by the managers or any other person who is looking after those issues. So make it available through this preprints, I just want to say.
So Nick, as a plant pathologist, I mean, you're seeing that with other pests and invasive species?
I don't see it being widely adopted in the plant health community yet. I see it much more prevalent in kind of my colleagues that do more genomic basic host pathogen interaction type work. But one point I'd like to make is that traditional publishing is really, really slow. It takes 3, 4, 5 months sometimes just for the peer review, and then until the paper is actually copy edited and actually published. it might take 9 months or 12 months. And so the preprints really allow you to accelerate this process. You can have your paper out in the open and shareable within a day or two. And that is really a game changer.
So next question then for Stephanie and Sam. Stephanie, you had a really good example there around the scooping or potential scooping of your work. We had another question from one of our registrants saying, will our content be taken by some well-funded labs to pursue while the preprint is out? So what are your concerns around preprinting and whether or not you might actually find your work being scooped by others?
So I wonder if that would be a valid concern. I'm guessing would a big laboratory do that? But I mean, it's still up to the scientific community, you know, to scrutinize your work and so on. But the thing is that I'm thinking about is you can show that with a date stamp when things are published, that your work was indeed first, that you did have the finding first, and then I guess you could write to the editor and ask, I think I should be accredited for the knowledge gain here.
Good one. Yeah. Sam, anything to add on that in terms of the date stamping at Bioarchive and whether you've seen other examples?
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is really posting a preprint is very similar to discussing your work at a conference. And, you know, there's the same, you know, potential risks. But with a preprint, you at least have that date stamp, you have a permanent digital object identifier that other people can start to cite you. And just with the global awareness that you get from posting a preprint, that can actually protect you because more researchers in your field are going to know that you've made that discovery compared to presenting to a limited number of people at a conference, for example. And we were really interested in kind of quantifying this a little bit because, you know, you just hear about the fears, but you don't necessarily hear about whether it really happens. And so we asked in a survey that we did of our authors and our readers, this was back in 2018, but I'm sure it's very similar now, whether this was happening. And it was happening in a very, very small number of people. I think it was like 0.7% or something like that. And so the fear is huge and the reality is incredibly small, but the benefits of posting a preprint are massive. So it's just really about weighing up, you know, the positives which are here and the negatives, you know, right down. Or maybe I did it the wrong way, but you get the gist.
Yeah, great point. Thanks. Excellent. So next one is to Sam again and to Nick. There are still quite a few lingering concerns, certainly in the chat, but also in the questions we got from pre-registrants around the possible conflicts between preprints and publishing in a scientific journal. I hope we've covered that, and the elephant in the room, the list of journals is now very, very long. But what are some of the things that researchers should bear in mind before they post a preprint? There might be situations when it's actually not appropriate to do that. Can you think of any or provide any examples of where that might be true?
Maybe the most obvious one is work you want to potentially patent. And I think you should, in that case, follow the same procedures as if you were to submit it as a peer-reviewed journal article. Other than that, I do not see an issue. I don't know if, Sam, you have other thoughts?
No, not really. That was the only one I could think of too. Really, it's just down to, from our perspective as a preprint server, to make sure that, you know, all co-authors have agreed to the submission. Like, that's a really important factor to consider. And then for you personally, you know, even though journals in the life sciences are supportive of preprints, it's always handy to just have a look at their policy and just to check if there's a particular version that they would prefer you to post, and maybe after peer review they don't want you to post that version. It's important to be knowledgeable about that, but otherwise I would say there's no real considerations. And maybe Jessica or someone can post links to like Sherpa Romeo and Transpose, which are great databases to help you find that, because sometimes looking on the journal's website it's hard to find the policies. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. There are some really good resources that certainly I think Bioarchive linked to, AgriArchive links to, the ASAP Bio website is really helpful in terms of FAQs. So do have a look at those. Sam, I think the default for most preprints is the CC BY license, but I think you also offer some other versions. Anything you want to say about, what the pros and cons of those might be, very briefly?
I mean, it's really up to the individual. CC BY means that your work can be used really in unlimited ways, but with attribution. So people can reuse and remix your work, and more people will be using your work and benefiting, and you'll get more citations as well, presumably that way. And I think that's been shown with open access journals in general that can help. And so really it's personal preference. If you would prefer your work to not be used commercially, then you can select that license that would be CC BY NC, and there's a whole host of options. I would check Creative Commons. Yeah.
Stephanie, you raised a hot potato earlier around the citation of preprints, and I'd love to hear what your views on that subject are.
So I think from my perspective, or from the papers that I was specifically referring to, is taking a look at the initial submission as a preprint and then looking at how it changed over peer review. For me, I can say it was added to. So nothing was changed or taken away. And also, if one has a good feel about the field that you're talking about the science that you're publishing in, then I guess it's still, like, again, up to the scientific community to scrutinize it, and peer review is so important, but you'll get an idea if this sounds a little bit outlandish or not. I think it might be risky, but again, as what we say is that there's many benefits, as many of these techniques were later then applied in more preprints. So I guess it's a case-by-case basis. It has to be considered that way. There are some things to be cautious about, so maybe go check and follow up. If you can find a better citation using something that's already peer-reviewed, why not bother? But then, as something that was mentioned earlier in some of the discussions, is that it is so important to give attribution or to acknowledge the work of somebody else, that you cannot, if it's based on somebody else's findings, then yes, do risk citing a preprint.
Any other comments on that? This is quite a controversial one, possibly. Nick, what do you think as a journal editor?
It's a fluid world right now. I think everybody should submit to preprint archives. Everybody should be transparent in their work. I would be cautious as an author when submitting, because you want the work to be matured. You don't want to submit something that is only half-baked, right? Because it lives on the internet forever afterwards. But I think the bottom line is that it's a huge benefit. The work is more citable, more recognized, easier shared. I see absolutely no disadvantage.
Great.
Andy, we're coming to the last part of the webinar, so we move on to introduce.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that. It's a great idea. Yeah.
Fantastic. And thank you for introducing the one about citations. It had been raised by attendees. So there's been quite a bit of activity on the Q&A. Let's see how much we can cover. I think I'll start by the question that attracted most votes. There is a question from Philippa Benson mentioning the fact that, especially in the context of COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen much more attention to research posted as preprints in the media, which has meant that we have seen essentially media stories get into non-specialized audiences. So essentially the lay public was reading about those. Obviously, for someone who is a researcher, they can understand the difference between a preprint and a peer-reviewed article and how the publication process evolves. But this may not be obvious for the public. So there have some questions there as to how can we address this? Are there any risks? And I thought I would maybe ask Sam to share her thoughts on this, because I know that Bioarchive and medRxiv have been doing a lot of thinking around this in the context of COVID-19.
Yeah, and so I think one thing that is interesting too about the response with COVID-19 is that researchers really wanted to share their work early, regardless. And so there were, press releases that were happening before, the manuscript was even posted as a preprint. And so you could argue that surely it's better to have the preprint there that people can actually look at and comment on and provide feedback on, and for everyone to be able to actually look at the manuscript and look at the data, rather than just like a data release by a press release or something similar, or a news article of some sort. But one thing that we did notice during the pandemic was that, early on, journalists were not necessarily explaining or making very clear that the manuscript was a preprint and what that meant. But as the pandemic progressed, that adoption was taken up much more. And so I think it's just about educating journalists to make sure that they always say that this has not been undergone peer review, and that can really help the situation.
Thank you so much, Sam. Okay, looking through the question, I'm going to try to combine a couple. There were some questions as to how many papers are actually posted as preprints and then eventually peer-reviewed and published. There are also some papers posted on preprint servers that actually may never make it to a journal. And what are the thoughts on that, and whether we have any information as to how often this happens. I'm going to maybe start with Sridhar. I wonder if you have any thoughts on this, particularly from the perspective of Agri-Archive.
See, it happens, like not all the preprints get into the journal, but the preprints is there. It is the findings which somebody has put up. So it is there for the public to scrutinize and then to adopt it or not adopt it. And the journals which now they are properly practiced to use what to be reported, what not to be reported when it comes to the case of preprints. And the researchers, some of the people may they publish the preprint and they may not submit to the journal. So it happens there. And what is happening in this process is many people want to cite that one or not because it is not reviewed. So these kind of questions are there. But if you are working on the already existing work, so you have to cite it on that, then only it gets known to the other researchers as well.
If I may, I'd like to make a follow-up point to this. I think one case where it's perfectly fine to publish in a preprint and maybe not even submit to a journal is in the case of negative results. So a lot of us have, folders filled with data that we feel like we can't really wrap up into a paper. And so everybody else is repeating that same work over and over. Maybe that's a good case for putting it out on a preprint server. It'll never make it into a peer-reviewed study because it's probably not seen as impactful, but it's perfectly good work otherwise.
Very good recommendation about the negative result. I think it's something that the publications have been grappling with for a while, and I'm not sure that the journals really managed to find the perfect solution, if there is one, so always good to have alternatives. There was a question from one of the attendees about, we've been discussing how the rapid dissemination of research can accelerate scientific discovery, but what about combining that with data sharing, for example, which has also been on the rise recently? What should we do about that? What do we think? I think I'm gonna maybe address this to Stephanie as a researcher. Essentially, there are different elements on the open science here. What are your thoughts about, again, the open data combined with preprints?
That sounds fantastic. I think the more transparent, it was mentioned earlier, the more transparent, the better. So yes, I think so. Always peer review is always great, but then having your data out there and available, being as transparent as possible is just better for the scientific community. Again, as with preprints, what I think is really important is that if you release something that isn't exactly matured or ready to be published, then it might be negative for you as a researcher. But transparency is something that I think cannot be negative or too negative.
I couldn't agree more. Excellent summary. Right, I think I'm going to just introduce one more question because we only have six minutes left. But maybe following on this around also the sharing of data, we touches a bit on policies potentially at preprint servers. There were a couple of questions around the screening process at preprint servers. So I think I'll ask Sam maybe to share a little bit as to how you handle this on Bioarchive. And if you want to mention as well what your approach is to data sharing, please do.
Yeah, so the screening procedure is basically kind of two-step process. When manuscripts come in, we check, that all the important components are there, and the metadata and all that kind of thing, and that it is a research manuscript. And then it really goes to all our PIs who are affiliates. And one of those will have a look at the manuscript and check whether it's actually research, check if it's like pseudoscience or anything, and if the results turn out to be completely wrong, would they be harmful? And so that's the screening aspect of things. And we have various fields in the submission process where you can add in, a conflict of interest, for example, but also external links to data that you have available online. So that's kind of how we help to encourage the deposition of data and the sharing of data.
Wonderful, thank you so much. There are a number of questions on the Q&A that sadly we don't have time to cover, but I hope that the discussion around the different elements was useful. We wanted to just take a bit of time in the final minutes to introduce one last item for our speakers before we wrap up for today. So again, a question for all the speakers. We just wanted to see you've covered a lot of this, but if you had to do a very brief pitch to a researcher in the plant sciences or agricultural sciences as to why they should be preprinting their work now, what would you tell them? And again, I'll go in the order on my screen. So maybe Stephanie first.
Okay, so what I think is something I think a lot about as an early career researcher is effective science communication. This is a fantastic tool. It should not be overlooked. I wish I started preprinting sooner. It's a great way to get your knowledge out there.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Right, Sridhar.
I would like to say that I also go with the Stephen. It is very much necessary and useful for the early career researchers who would like to be first to communicate their research to the public and to look forward for any other collaborations. Until unless you publish in a kind of a repository which will help. See, these repositories are not just as a websites. They are all interconnected. So once you put anything into those repository, it gets connected with all the networks in academic networks, and people who are looking for it will like to see and then look for the collaborations, and probably you might get the funders also. So it's the early careers should embrace this mode of preprints publication than waiting for the journals to publish after a peer review of 4 to 8 weeks. So it's a considerable time they can buy if they go with this model.
Thank you so much. Right, next, Sam.
So I guess I would say, we've seen the benefits from posting preprints during the pandemic and how quickly we've come from, understanding what the cause is to having, treatments and, preventatives with vaccines, how quickly that happened in such a short period of time. And so I'm really kind of flipping the situation and asking you the question, like, what are the reasons why you shouldn't post a preprint, and do they really weigh up with the benefits that we can get from the rapid sharing of preprints? And I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much. Very good. And last but certainly not least, Nick.
Yeah, I think I share all the enthusiasm for sharing your work on preprints. I think maybe one good way of thinking about sharing it on preprints is that it's basically the same as giving a talk at a meeting or sharing proceedings from a meeting. It's just another means of rapid communication, but the big difference is that it's there all the time, 24/7. Anybody in the world can see it. So those colleagues that weren't at the conference but are interested in the topic can also see it. And so it's just a benefit. It's another means of you rapidly communicating your work to all those interested around the world. And so I absolutely see, I encourage everybody to use preprints anyway.
Wonderful message. Right, we're almost at the time, Andy. I wonder if you have any final words to share before we close today.
I just wanted to thank all of the speakers, to Sam, to Stephanie, to Sridhar and Nick for going through what I thought was a really compelling argument in favour of the adoption of preprints in plant sciences and agricultural sciences. I hope that we've answered a lot of the really niggling questions that people might have around the opportunities for using preprints. I think if there are any questions that we weren't able to address during the session, then we'll collect those all together at the end, and we're going to be circulating the video, and we'll try and address the questions in maybe some of the blog coverage that we have after the event. So thank you to everyone for attending the event, and please do preprint your research.
Thank you so much from me as well to all of the speakers for their time, their presentations, for sharing their expertise, and all of you who are here and for your questions and engagement. Well, it's fantastic to have you here. Thank you so much.